And here we go.
We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, planet.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange! 145!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Countdown to Launch, our series leading up to the launch very soon now of Starship. And unlike the last time we did our Countdown to Launch, as you can see in the corner of the screen, we actually have a countdown to launch. We are approaching our targeted no earlier than date of this coming Friday at 7 a.m. So that will be counting down to that in the corner of the screen, and we will be providing you updates as we get closer and closer to that potential liftoff. So we are going to be talking a lot about those potential launch dates, where we are right now, and what roadblocks lay ahead and what roadblocks are now in place. As a reminder, if you have any questions, you can always tag us at NASASpaceflight in chat, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as possible during our show today. But it's not just me, of course, that'll be blabbing along. As you could see, I have fantastic people alongside me, including Alex. How's it going, Alex?
Front footing here. But yeah, all of this wait is almost over. We're getting closer and closer to that point of, seeing Starship launching again. So that's really exciting.
Awesome. And then we also have with us Trevor. How's it going, Trevor?
I certainly can't complain. We're getting close to the launch of the most powerful rocket in history. How could I not be fantastic?
There you go. Perfectly put. So let's hop right into things then. Not Hoppy or Hopper, but we'll hop right into where we are currently. I believe we had some new roadblocks that have also popped up. Alex, where are we at?
Yeah, so actually, as we were setting up here for this live stream, we had some road closures that were revoked. If you remember, there were 3 road closures for today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. The ones for today and tomorrow were canceled a long time ago, but the one for Wednesday still stood. Obviously, SpaceX targeting the 17th. That meant that obviously that one was not going to be used. So it being canceled is kind of what we expected to happen. But then there were another 3 that have been released for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All of them not only have the same kind of window that we see for the usual window for flight, which starts around midnight Central Time, all the way to 2 p.m. But also on the documents for these closures, it says for spaceflight activities. So it literally says that this is for a launch. Now, it also says though that the license has not been modified yet. It's still, if they were to be granted the modification to the license, it will be under the same one that they have, but with that modification to be able to fly again. And so definitely, we're very, very close. Again, we are still waiting for regulatory approval, but everything in the closure side, the hazard zones have also been issued and things like that. All of that is already in place. I think the only thing, if I'm not forgetting about that, is that maybe the TFRs are like the temporary flight restrictions for the American side of the airspace is the only thing that is basically pending. But other than that, everything else is in place and just waiting for the approval to modify that license.
Yeah, that's the key word there, especially in their tweet with the as early as November 17th. pending regulatory approval. Which I saw someone in chat asking if that's Starship's version of the Gukp, the vent that the part of it that shall not be named that keeps bringing up issues. But we'll see. So the other interesting thing that we saw, Trevor, I know recently now, is that you have the destack again, the hot stage ring removed again. What's the current status right now with the ship and the booster?
Yeah, so as we can see on our live views, we no longer have a full stack. After earlier, or I guess late last week, we saw SpaceX install the FTS system on both the booster and the ship. Jack Beyer took some phenomenal photographs of those, as always. And we saw then a full stack, which seemed like it may have been the last one for launch. And then I guess it was about a day later, we saw them destack. And it's not immediately clear why they've done this. They could have run into some final issues while they were in that full stacked configuration that they wanted to fix before a launch attempt, or it could just be they don't want the vehicle in the full stack while they have a week or more to wait. So we don't 100% know what's going on. SpaceX, as usual, has not tweeted anything. But yeah, right now the boosters on the OLM as always. It had its hot staging ring removed, and then ship is still in the chopsticks. This could be for more FTS work. It could be for more work on the dome under the hot staging ring. We really don't know.
It's very interesting to see that we thought, again, hopefully, full stack, it's ready to go, and now all of a sudden it's kind of not. But one of the big things was the flight termination system being installed. I know there's some questions about installed versus armed. Alex, any chance you can kind of clarify what we do know, at least of the flight termination system?
Yeah, so one could argue that there's probably like 3 steps in the way that you can install that flight termination system, right? And all the way to actually being able to terminate the flight. Well, I should say probably terminate the flight is the 4th step, but yeah. So you have the installation of the charges and all of the equipment for the flight termination system, right? That is what we've seen. Then these flight termination system, there's like an actual physical system in place, so the charges are not triggered accidentally. And so you can see, I believe we have pictures from Jack that show these, remove before flight tags that are located. Those are pins that they need to basically remove before flight. That's why they have those tags. They remove them, and then they close the flight termination system box, and then they can stack the 2 vehicles. Now, with that in place, that is sort of the second step when you pull the pins. The third step is once the ship is on top of the booster, the QD is in place, a quick disconnect basically, and they are in the countdown. Now, they have they have the physical safety pin, but that doesn't mean that it is armed. Because the flight termination system, the electronics and the computers need to be told, hey, now from here, this point on, then you can activate. That is basically what you need. And so that's the third part that is done during the countdown. Basically, during the last minutes of the countdown, there's an electronic signal that is sent to the FTS, to the flight termination system, and it's told, hey, from here on, if there's something bad going on with a vehicle, you need to activate, and then you need to terminate the flight. And obviously, the step 4 will be actually terminating the flight if needed during flight. So basically, those 4 steps, and we are right now definitely in step 1. Those charges, we've seen them installed. Those boxes have been closed out. Now, we don't know if they actually pull the pins. That second stage of the whole process, it's not very clear. Again, I said the other day that I kind of think I saw one of the guys with one of the tags there, those red tags that they use for remove before flight. But other than that, it's not ever fully sure if you don't actually see them, all of them pulled out. So I cannot really, I can only say maybe, but not for sure. And then, step 3 will be once the day of launch. That'll be exciting because, we hope that step 4 is never achieved because we want that full stack to survive the whole flight. But, if it's needed, at least this time around, maybe with all the modifications that they have done, it'll work. Hopefully.
Wait, you mean to tell me those red tags aren't just keychains? They actually use them?
Yeah, they can keep them as keychains after the fact, but not before.
Let's take some questions from chat here. Let's take this one from here. Bayersdorfer. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. They want to know, how late do you think Starship will be stacked before launch? Trevor, what do you think?
My guess is they'll want a full stack about 2 to 3 days ahead of their first launch attempt. We know that it can be a little bit later than that, but I suspect, like we were talking about earlier, SpaceX would rather have the full stack, and then worst comes to worst, they realize, oh, we want to change one more thing, we're not fully happy with the data, then let's destack, fix it, and restack. So I think the 2 to 3 days would probably give them that little bit of buffer that they would want to make sure the vehicle is in good condition for a launch.
And while we're talking about all the stacking and destacking, Alex, I'll put this one to you. Linus wants to know, why do they keep removing the hot staging ring so often? What do they need to access underneath that hot staging ring?
Well, there's a lot of systems down there. They have things like, the grid fin actuators and things like the vents for the top dome for the methane tank and things like that. There's a lot of things basically going on with that top dome, and so frankly, there might be a ton of stuff that they might be looking into, because it's really crowded in the sense of how many systems they have installed there. Because if you think about it, where do you put those systems? Because on the engine section, there are engines. So you might be able to fit a few of them, but that engine section is very crowded. Then the rest of the vehicle is just tanks, right? So where do you put things like the avionics or things like that, or the batteries? So you put them at the top. That's where there's a space for that. Otherwise, there's not really any other space in the vehicle than maybe in the engine section, if you're able to fit something in between the engines. But then again, you're in between the engines, so you need to put there something that is strong and sturdy to be able to sustain all of that.
There we go. Let's take some super chats here. People that have been supporting us, we really appreciate all the support. Thank you very much. JR, 2-year milestone, Red Team member, saying, thanks for all the amazing content. Can't wait for IFT2. Oh, we can't either, as you can tell by the fact we're already doing this week here on Monday. Coco Cats, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. Chris W, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. Jim Cavett, thank you as well for gifting a Red Team membership. Lots of excitement here. Stabby Unicorn with a $100 tip at tips.nasaspaceflight.com, saying, uninteresting fact of the day, I had an omelet with bacon and spinach for breakfast. Yum? That does sound really good, but I am beyond appreciative of that generous amount of support. Thank you. And for those who don't know, that is an additional way to help support us. Is if you want to use something other than Google system, you can just go to tips.nasaspaceflight.com as well as another way of support. Wow. We've got Ragel, 15 months with a Capcom membership there. Nate Saunders celebrating 14 months, Red Team member. And then Andy Law gifting 10 Red Team memberships. Goodness gracious. Whew. All right. It seems like Jake has decided to join the excitement, so apologies for random tail pops up. But Musical Wolves, a name we see here. Whoop, hang on. There we go. Sorry about that. That was Jake messing things up here. But Musical Wolves want to know, has a possibility of weather violation been published? Trevor, what's the weather looking like right now?
Yeah, so unfortunately, SpaceX has not released any weather forecasts. I know the weather for early this week, when we were originally thinking that launch could be either like Monday or Wednesday or something like that, was quite poor, but it seemed like it was improving later on in the week.
Look at that weather.
That does not take into account some things that it's hard to track without weather balloons and other data that only SpaceX and the range would have, like upper altitude wind shear and whatnot. So it's looking pretty good for Friday as of right now, at least last time I checked. However, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I think all of the people that are down at Starbase right now are probably using canoes to get around, just based off the amount of rain that has been going on there recently. It's been quite a bunch, and yeah, the flooding is definitely an issue, but I don't think it will be an issue for launch itself as of now.
Yeah, and on Friday, the FAA's weather report is saying sunny with a near high of 77, light and variable wind becoming northeast 5 to 9 miles an hour in the morning. And, obviously we don't have access to the Starship launch criteria for weather, but that definitely seems like it would be well within bounds.
Let's hope that's the case. As always, we want good weather. And a reminder, there's a lot of different factors that go into the weather. Of course, clear skies would be nice. It's not always required. It's the lower winds, and in particular, the upper level winds as you get higher up into Earth's atmosphere. Those can really push onto the vehicle. So it's multiple things that they're looking at: ground weather and weather higher in the air. And I'm sure probably a little bit of space weather as well. Paul Dawson asking, they seem to have stacking dialed in now. Could you see them stack and launch in the same day? Alex, do you think we're at that point yet?
Well, that would be rather interesting, right? Because I don't think they have done that ever. And also the fact that they start the road closure at midnight Central kind of makes me think that they will never do that, because they will need to basically stack the day before. So technically it's not on the same day. But yeah, even with the stacking and destacking and everything, there's also the fact that once they stack, they need to prepare the ship, the basically all of the umbilical connection ports and everything needs to be prepared for when they connect the umbilical back. They have these covers that they need to remove. They need to connect a bunch of other things. So it's not as straightforward. Now, maybe in the future, this obviously needs to come down to much more manageable times. But definitely better than any other rocket. I mean, I don't know of any other rocket that can be stacked and put together this quickly, right? Even Falcon 9 might take a whole day or something to be able to connect everything. So yeah, it's really interesting.
And again, still no exact reason why they keep going up and down and up and down and up and down. Obviously, there's some method to their madness. It's just they're not telling us what that method is. Let's see here. While we're talking about that, if it were to be stacked, Keith Egan is wondering, could SpaceX use drones potentially to pull the pins for the FTS while the ship is stacked? Do you think there's any potential way to be able to pull those pins stacked, or is it always going to mean, or at least for now, that destacking process? Trevor, I'll put that one to you.
Yeah, with drones, I think definitely not. However, longer term, what I see is another thing that I'm not sure if Alex mentioned it earlier or not, but there's a inhibitor in the ship disconnect, which basically prevents the FTS from working while that inhibitor is in. So it's kind of similar to a pin that automatically gets removed, when the vehicle actually takes off and that system needs to be armed. So what I see them doing long term is probably just removing those pins ahead of time when they have more confidence in the system, and then they can have the FTS arm automatically pull the pins. As we see this with Falcon 9, right? It's not like once the rocket is vertical, there are people up there pulling pins.
Right. Obviously, they've got that kind of down to science with Falcon. You also have the fact that this is a much larger vehicle that we're discussing here than Falcon as well. Here's a question from Paul Kelly, and I'll put this one to you, Alex. They're saying, what happens to the manually connected lines going to the ship at launch? Do they get torn out? Are they removed / not connected before flight? And I mean, some of the stage 0 stuff is my favorite.
Yeah, indeed. So there are at least 2 that we see normally. Sometimes there's a third one. I remember one that was somewhere near basically the hot stage ring. I couldn't come up with a whole word. Excuse me. So yeah, there's like two that are connected to the ship. Again, there's like a third that we've seen recently, sometimes on some stacks, that connects to hot staging ring. But other than that, so those lines are disconnected before the final. Once they are actually in the final flight, they don't connect those two, and they basically just leave the ship on top with just the quick disconnect. And so the basic thing that they need to do is just remove those, or not install them in the first place, and that's it. They are not yanked out at liftoff.
There we go. And again, I do want to go back to the weather a second because, it's been pretty wet right now. And I've seen two different types of questions relating to the rain and some of the stuff going on with the vehicle in stage 0. So, Trevor, we have a question from Gary Goldie asking, does the rain affect anything under the hot stage ring or the heat shield on the ship? Also saying great stream as usual, which thank you. But what role does weather play on that vehicle in terms of, weatherproofing it and making sure it can withstand this lovely Texas weather?
Yeah. I'm not sure if you cut out during that question just for me or for everyone. But to answer the question, we're not 100% sure, what the criteria are for the heat shield, especially, and what in different weather conditions. I think we can safely assume that it's probably okay, given that SpaceX, obviously has confidence in the system, and they're building it outside. It's always been done outside, and that's just the way that it's going to be. But it is very possible that, maybe a little bit of moisture under those tiles could expand a lot during reentry due to the heat and then crack a tile or something like that. But that may be something that SpaceX has taken into account, or it may be something that SpaceX will need data for. And then that data will come from the first mission or the first reentry. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, and Houston Lucas, with the 15-month Capcom membership, which thank you for that, basically saying, could that water in the padding under the tiles be an issue like you were talking about there? And if there's any precedent from the shuttle, which it's important to note that all of these heat shield tiles do have some form of waterproofing. And a lot of that will actually end up burning away typically on reentry in those tiles. So a lot of times, if you notice, there's actually a small little circle around some of the shuttle tiles. If that's the case, that means that a tile has been previously flown because they had to re-inject it with the material that helps to waterproof it, since, again, as I mentioned, it typically burns away during that re-entry portion. So it's potentially an issue, but I don't think it's going to be because, A, they've gotten a lot better with these heat shield tiles from shuttle. They now use the Tough Rock, which was a lot more tough, and it's not just because of the acronym. So I think that in that sense, it's not as much of an issue as it used to be with shuttle. And again, the fact that we haven't seen it fully yet with reentry means there still could be issues with the reentry portion and the tiles that we don't know yet, just because of the fact, we haven't seen it do any type of reentry, which hopefully we'll see on its trajectory towards Hawaii, maybe on this flight. And along those lines, I'll put this to both of you guys and get your prediction on it. We've got Light Through Dark asking, will the wait between IFT 2 and 3 be just as long as the wait between the first and second flights? What do you guys think? Alex, I'll start with you and then Trevor.
Well, I think we usually talk about this, right? That the FAA has this sort of mishap investigation kind of definition where if you sort of go into the page that they have for what they consider a mishap on a flight, you can see that even just not achieving the whole flight means that they start the mishap investigation. Obviously, if you think about it, SpaceX will also do that. It will just not call it a mishap investigation. That sounds a little bit weird for the SpaceX way of doing things, but they will still investigate what's going on, what happened, and what else might have occurred, and what fixes they might need to put in place. And so definitely here, what we expect is that there's the least amount of things going on, right? They don't need to install a deluge plate. They don't need to, modify the flight termination system. All of the things that we've seen for the second flight that they needed to modify, we are hopeful that they are all going to work. And if the flight fails, there's not a lot of modifications that they need to do. And therefore, the whole paperwork stuff, because, all of those recommendations, all of those modifications and everything, all of that needs to go through paperwork at the end of the day. So the less that they need to modify, the less that they need to go through paperwork, and therefore the faster the approval comes for the third flight. Now, on the hardware side, it's not just the approval, obviously, but also the hardware side. Booster 10 might be already getting the engines. If not, it might have all of the engines by now. But, it's not just engines. It needs to get all of the other systems as well. And eventually, it also get its own hot staging ring. Then once this stack is out of the pad here that we see in screen, and then it'll have to, once it is out, then they need to roll out Booster 10 so that it starts its own static test campaign, and also do the same for Ship 28, which is also with its engines and everything at the production site. So how long could it take? We don't really know, but the hope is that everything will be shorter, both from the hardware and from the approval side. But for that, the second flight needs to go really, really well.
Yeah, that minor caveat there. Trevor, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Alex hit a lot of the main points, but I think in general, if the time between Flight 2 and Flight 3 is the same as the time between Flight 1 and Flight 2, SpaceX will consider that a large failure on their part. Obviously, during the first flight, there was a lot of work that will hopefully not have to be repeated. Due to, like Alex was saying, the deluge plate and some of the upgrades that they're making to Booster 9 and subsequent boosters like Booster 10, including especially the two larger chines with the CO2 tanks under those. So, yeah, I mean, I would be very surprised if it wasn't a substantially shorter amount of time between Flight 2 and 3. I personally think it'll probably be on the order of 3 to 4 months, somewhere in there. But like Alex was saying, that obviously highly depends on how this flight goes. If this flight goes very well, SpaceX could do a fairly rapid turnaround, and if it goes really poorly, it could be another 6 months or so until they can launch again.
Yeah, I would go with 2 weeks Elon time. So that way that means it could be 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. I want to acknowledge some more support that we've been getting here. Justin Simpson, thank you very much. 6-month Capcom member milestone. FTS armed, launch soon, hopefully clear skies for this launch. That is what we are all hoping here. We also have Philip Whitehouse, 40-month Capcom member milestone. Wow, that's a long time. Great to see the launch window from the Hawaii closure. Yes, we will hopefully have a launch no earlier than Friday. Then we have Jeffrey S. with 24 months, 2 years Capcom membership. My goodness, I'm glad you guys all stick around through this. Saying many thanks for your continued excellence covering all things spaceflight. Well, thank you for your continued support, too. Then we have Muddy Creek Critters, 15 months Red Team membership. Thank you very much for that. Along with Ricardo, also 15 months, saying thank you for your many wonderful live streams, sharing your expertise with all of us. I'm very much enjoying the membership perks as well. Good, I'm glad you enjoy the perks. That's one of the key things with the memberships. We want to make sure that you get the most out of it and enjoy getting those extra things, extra images, behind the scenes videos, things like that we can provide to our members there. Apocalypse Cow, thank you for gifting 10 Red Team memberships. If you do get one of those gifted memberships, please thank them very much. We've got Joey with 2 E's with the tip from tips.nasaspaceflight.com saying great work, guys. Well, thank you. A cat named Elon, 5-month Red Team member milestone. I won't tell Jake that might actually be a better name. Saying let's go Starship. Leanne, 6-month Red Team member.
Chat? That's my question.
You'd be surprised at how smart some of these cats can be, especially mine, who's behind me scratching nothing on the floor. Okay, I stand corrected. Leanne Durkin, thank you for 6-month Red Team membership, saying fantastic coverage as always. Thank you. And then we have Andres here with the super chat and a question coming along with it saying, what would be the future of Starship if the orbital launch mountain tower blow up during IFT2? Let's simplify that a bit. If we have more significant stage 0 damage and we realize, oh, the plate isn't doing exactly what we needed to, what do you think that means for the future? Alex, let's start with you. I'll put that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who goes first? Wait, here, Trevor. Do we have a fight mode here or what? There we go.
There we go.
Okay, you start, Trevor. I'll give it to you.
So I was gonna, I think this was something that you were gonna say too, and I think a lot of the thinking is that if the deluge system does not work, then SpaceX is going to have to go to a flame trench. However, my response to this is a flame trench isn't this magical thing that solves all problems, right? What SpaceX, or with a flame trench, you still need a way of deflecting the flame to have the momentum going a different way. So ultimately, your launch pad ends up with this big trench under it that still needs something basically equivalent to the deluge plate that SpaceX has already built. So you could think of the launch pad as basically already having a flame trench and a flame deflector, but instead of the exhaust being directed in one or two directions, it's just directed in all directions. So I really don't think that a flame trench would be the next step. I think the next step would probably just be further increasing the amount of water that goes through the deluge plate, possibly increasing the thickness of the steel or whatever. But hopefully that's not needed.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is supposed to work, obviously, but then again, the concrete was also supposed to work at least for one launch, and it didn't. So it could very well be that they need to modify it. But as you mentioned, at the end of the day, just build a flame trench is not really the whole solution, because at the end of the day, you're just reshaping the problem. You still have a flame diverter that you also need to cool down, because that thing is going to be underneath of the engines either way, right? Either if it's a ramp or a flat blade, you still have it right underneath of the engine, so you need a way to cool it down so that you don't have to take days to refurbish it, right? And so you need a water system to be able to cool it down. You need that flame diverter, and then apart from that, you basically just it's a matter of you either enclose it and have a ramp going out, or just basically have it all open and it's instead just a plate on the bottom, where you just try to not erode the whole thing and dig into the ground. They also have put not only the plate but also a huge concrete foundation. This time around, it's actually a concrete foundation, a proper foundation. So hopefully, even in the case that say the plate fails, perhaps we don't see this time around a crate underneath, because this time around they actually have a proper foundation below the plate. So even if it digs into the plate or anything like it, maybe this time around it could be a much shorter turnaround time in order to figure out how to optimize this whole thing and fix it, obviously.
Yeah, and
yeah,
plus,
that.
there's also the point, at least in terms of timeline, that hopefully SpaceX won't have to have as thorough of an investigation with the Fish and Wildlife Service next time, because the primary reason why the primary work that the Fish and Wildlife Service is doing is they're wanting to look into the deluge system and its effects on the local environment, and that's because it's a new thing since the last launch. So if it's if you have the same deluge system, you would at least reduce the amount of work that they have to do next time.
I will even argue that perhaps they might not even to do anything if they don't need to, modify the deluge or anything like it. If they just keep it the same, they have already done the review, so they wouldn't need. Because the same way that for Flight 1, you might have heard out there that for Flight 1 they needed to look into how to avoid sharks in the middle of the Gulf, right? So that was for Flight 1, but they didn't need to do that again for Flight 2, because for Flight 2 is a whole different thing. It's the deluge system. That is not the thing that they need to look for. In fact, if you look at the radar reevaluation for the first flight, you see all of these things, about how the ship as it re-enters, right, and then it goes down at terminal velocity into the ocean. They went, far above and beyond to be able to study how the breakup of the ship on the surface of the ocean will be, and how will impact the marine life and everything. So they did a huge amount of work for that first flight. For this second flight, since it's the same, it's not a different sort of thing, then all of that applies, right? They don't need to do that again. The only new thing that they need to do is a deluge system. If they hadn't installed that deluge system, or if they had installed that for the first flight, we wouldn't be in this situation right now, if you think about it, because all of that will have already been done in the past. It is true that we probably wouldn't have seen a first flight in April, but perhaps the second flight will have occurred a little bit faster than the first one. So just saying, maybe a little bit of foreshadowing. I know, hindsight 2020 and all of that, but maybe SpaceX should have installed that plate a little bit earlier. If you think about it.
It's definitely hard to know if it ended up saving time or not, because I think there's definitely an argument to be made that SpaceX just wanted to get the first launch off. They wanted that data so they could know what retrofits to start doing on the next vehicles. And they didn't know what retrofits to start, at least not all of the retrofits they wanted to do before that first flight took off. Then on the other hand, if they would have installed the plate before, then it's very possible that maybe some of the damage to the pad would have taken less time to repair. So
yeah, and then the modifications and things like that for the second flight will only have been to the vehicle side, because then you have the hot staging ring, you have the flight termination system will have already failed equally, you will have the engine shielding, all of the stuff will be focused on the sort of on the vehicle side rather than on the launch pad side. And now you wouldn't need a Fish and Wildlife Service, kind of review or anything like it. It will have been way different. But again, hindsight is 2020. But again, foreshadowing, maybe they need to do a few things ahead of time now that they can. That's why some people were saying, why are they doing the hot staging ring now? And it's like, well, why not, right? Because if you know that at the end of the day you might change that in the future, why not do it now? Now it's the time. Otherwise, if they change anything else and they need to do more reviews and more hardware, more engineering, things like that, then it's better to do it now that they have the time, right? Just do it now and just get rid of it for the future.
Two things. First, hindsight is 2020. Please let's not go back to 2020. Let's change that saying. I know that's not the meaning of it, but let's change it. Secondly, speaking of things breaking, we are aware that at the moment there is an issue with shop.nasaspaceflight.com. Fortunately, it is something that is beyond our control. It is the people that help actually provide the shop part of the shop. So, yeah, it is being worked on, I promise. So we appreciate all of you that are actually going to check out the shop. We are aware that it is currently down, but when it does come back up, don't forget to get your IFT2 patches and gear.
yeah, it looks like every single Shopify store is down.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's not great. This feels a lot like Starship trying to get off the pad on the first flight. It's completely masked. Is it? Is it not going to? It's sliding. This isn't good. Let's see. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Let's see here now. We had a tweet that Adrian posted and got a response from the Fish and Wildlife Service. So you can see that on your screen there, saying, regarding ongoing speculation about a potential launch license, NSF reached out to the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Federal Aviation Administration for updates on the progress of the Starship license. No updates as of this morning. So that is... I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing yet. Trevor, what do you think?
I mean, I don't, like you said, I don't think it's necessarily good or bad. It's just that the investigation that they're doing is not complete yet. So to me, it seems like SpaceX would probably need the license approval by Tuesday or Wednesday to be able to support a launch on Friday. So I suspect if we don't have it by Wednesday afternoon, we can probably, emphasis on probably, say that the launch has been pushed back from the 17th target date. just based on last time, right? SpaceX got the license on a Friday and they're ready to launch on a Monday. So they needed 2 days in between the license being dropped and their first launch attempt. It's very possible that that's been reduced this time, but we really don't know. So it's an educated guess. That said, no update is in some sense good because it means they haven't found any. It probably means they haven't found any more significant issues or anything like that, and they're probably just in the final stages of their report, finishing everything up, dotting their I's, crossing their T's, and making sure that they cannot be open to any lawsuits or something like that.
I think also we're so used to with everything with Starship being so open, the fact that we have our cameras so close to the action, literally across the street from it. We get to watch it 24/7. So we're used to hearing everything, seeing all the updates, Elon tweeting about it. And then you get something like this where it's not as open through the entire process. Obviously, we're still occasionally getting updates. We're hearing about it. It's just not the access that we're used to with all things Starship. So I think sometimes that can make it seem worse than it really is when it's more a matter of they're working on it. Soon, TM. So
Yeah.
let's take more of your questions here that were tagged at NASASpaceflight in chat. And Charlie asking, and Alex, I'll put this one to you, because I know we talked about this, I think, during the wet dress rehearsal on stream. Saying, are ship and booster completely isolated from each other? Are there any power / plumbing / electrical joints that are connected until stage separation? And I know they've even had to make some additions now with the hot stage ring too, right?
Yeah, so in terms of electrical connections and plumbing and things like that, we are not fully sure. We've tried to look for them. If there are any connections, they are very, very hidden because it's not really easy to see. Like, at first look, it doesn't look like there's anything else that has any sort of electrical connections. That's not like some power line between the vehicles or anything like it. It doesn't look like there's any sort of data connection between the vehicles. If there is, again, it's very hidden because we've tried many times to be looking for that. And when I say we, I say I mean the whole collective of the community that looks at everything Starship. I'm thinking, for example, the Ring Watchers. I usually talk with Jax from the Ring Watchers, and we're actually talking about this a couple of months ago. That like, man, do they even have any connection between the vehicles? Like any sort of data connections? Because Falcon 9 does have a connection between the second and first stage, and even Falcon Heavy, the side boosters have connections to the center core and up to the second stage. So these connections exist on Falcon 9, for example. But for Starship, and this is the surprising thing, for Falcon 9, it's very hard to actually get detailed images of it because it's it's in hangars and it's at the Cape, which you cannot really access and be like with a camera out there in all of the hangars. Here you can basically just stand in the side of the road and take pictures of the vehicles in very great detail. So it's quite interesting that if there is anything, we definitely cannot see that. I'm seeing right now in our preview that your cat is right now on top of your desk.
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
did
gosh.
see someone say that the reason our shop is down, they blame Jake. How could they do that? How could they blame you for that, right? There he kind of is, yes.
We need another.
Probably change
another
the banner
ticker.
to just say Jake as opposed to me, because that's what people really want to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
so
goodness
other
gracious.
than that, I'm not sure if there's any other connection. We know that there's a connection, a physical connection, as in how to mate the two vehicles together. They have 3 pins. Each pin has a little hook in the middle that basically connects, and the pin sort of aids on the once the two vehicles come together, once they stack the ship on top of the booster, the pins help guide it into the hook. And I see Jake is very hooked to your pets. So yeah.
Yeah. We promise we try and be as professional as possible here, but sometimes, pets are gonna pet. And he just wants to be pet.
It's Sawyer's assistant.
Oh my god. I'm
Hey,
Merch
Merch Pies are
Pie.
back.
Oh,
Oh, is the
Well,
shop up?
There we go.
well, it looks like at least these things work.
Yes. Now, we have a question here from Paulo, and I'll put this one over to you as we get the bat signal on screen there, waiting for them to send out the signal. Paulo's asking, with the activation of vacuum raptors through the hot stage, do we run the risk of overheating the raptors at sea level in Starship? Is there any potential damage, you think, then, with the hot staging in that point?
Well,
At this point, I think it's all speculation,
question.
but what do you think?
yeah, well, the RVACs aren't going to be ignited at sea level, right? They'll be ignited at
Yeah.
stage separation, which is, what, 30 to 50 kilometers? I don't even remember what
Higher.
altitude. Is it 80
It should
or
be
so?
very similar to Falcon 9, which is about 60 to 70 kilometers.
Okay.
So that's
Well,
almost near vacuum at that point.
Yeah, so you're basically in a vacuum at that point. And even if they were igniting at lower altitude, it's not heat that is the problem. The problem is something called flow separation, which is basically the entire point of the large nozzle is so that you're converting as much pressure into kinetic energy linearly. So as you move along the pressure or along the nozzle, the pressure is actually decreasing, and you can get pressure so low that it's under atmospheric pressure. So therefore, the atmosphere is pushing in on the sides, which causes the flow to separate from the bottom of the nozzle, and this can cause fairly large oscillations, which then, yeah, if you hit a resonance frequency, is not good news for your engine, and it can lead to the entire thing blowing up. So it's not a thermal issue, that's the problem.
And I bet Sawyer will tell you that's what happened with the shuttle. Because the RS-25, when it ignited, it rattled and basically wobbled. You can see on the slow-mo shots, you can see the nozzle bending and contracting and everything as the engine reaches full thrust.
There is a
Jack is also
reason-
wobbling. Jake, not Jack. Jack will be wobbling with
I'm
bacon.
sure-
But anyway,
I was going to say, I'm sure Jax has some wobbly moments too, but no, yeah. That is why prior to igniting the three RS-25 engines underneath the shuttle, they would do the gimbal test to make sure that they move, and then they would move them into a position where each of the engines were as far away from each other as possible for that very reason, so that they don't accidentally bump into each other and crack and cause serious shuttle issues, which we don't want. Here's a question from Wright, and I know this is something we've all been discussing here at NSF, trying to figure this out. There is, and I'll preface this, a potential at this point. There was a potential government shutdown that was prevented, and they pushed it down the road. Well, down the road is this Friday. So Wright wants to know, how does a potential government shutdown affect a potential launch? So let's say for some reason it doesn't end up going that way, and it has to be pushed. Do you think that this is going to cause a really big problem for the government shutdown? What do you think? Trevor, since you're American, I'll pose this one to you first.
yeah, go with him, American.
Well, I am definitely not in a political science degree, so I honestly have absolutely no idea. And I know the way that it works in the US is when the government shuts down, right, it's all non-essential activities need to stop. And that includes some fairly questionable activities, in my opinion, what they deem non-essential. But I certainly have absolutely no idea of what parts of the FAA are deemed essential and which parts are not. And also, the same applies to fish and wildlife. So I'm sorry, I have no idea.
Yeah. And that's another thing. Yeah, it's a lot of up in the air with all of this. It's still, maybe it will, maybe it won't. It's government. In any country, I think you can just say, well, it's the government, and go, that explains it.
Yeah, one of the things that I will say, if this sounds like deja vu, it's because it almost happened back in September, and I believe some people were asking, in the media and everything, were asking, whether things like the Psyche launch, which were, we were waiting to happen at the beginning of October, do those things continue? does NASA, for example, have any plan? The FAA, the Fish and Wildlife Service, do you all have any sort of plans? And most of them were like, well, until we arrive at that point, we're not really fully sure if we actually have a plan in place, right? Because, sometimes these government people just need to work for free, essentially. 'Cause you don't have the money, basically. That's what it all means. Now, I'm no American, but that's basically how it's being explained to me. And so I'll take it for granted because I've been explained that to me basically by people that work in these agencies. And so I'll take that they have a bit of experience from the past.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's also somewhat worth noting that the US did elect a different Speaker of the House since the last government shutdown. So we don't know how that would also play a role into the situation, but I don't know. That's exhausted my knowledge on this subject, so.
Right, so kind of just to clarify where we're at then with all this, especially with the government shutdown there. So that means that right now we still don't have the license yet. That needs to come from the FAA in collaboration with Fish and Wildlife Service. There is that risk, as we discussed, of the potential government shutdown, which would go into effect, I believe, late Friday night if they could not complete it. And then we do have some of the notice to mariners that are out. And in particular, we also have the new space activity road closures that came out today for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's kind of where we're at the moment with the as early as November 17th date pending regulatory approval.
Yeah.
I think, Alex, you had something you wanted to add to that too.
Yeah, so I was also thinking the fact that people think that there's like this is all in the Fish and Wildlife Service and that the FAA doesn't need to do anything more. Once the Fish and Wildlife Service finishes its own thing, then they need to basically hand that over to the FAA for the FAA to finish the written reevaluation to the programmatic environmental assessment. Basically, this whole thing, as we were mentioning before, is because they're adding something. If you remember back in 2022, there was this thing that was called the programmatic environmental assessment that they needed to do, right? And the deluge system was not in that. They didn't have things like, splashing down the booster on the Gulf of Mexico in the middle of, sharks and whatever. So that's what they had to do for the first flight. They had what is called a written reevaluation of the programmatic environmental assessment. It's like a whole mouthful of a thing, but that's how it's called. And so that is basically what they are right now for second flight. They are right in the middle of that with the Fish and Wildlife Service. Once the Fish and Wildlife Service finishes its own thing, then the FAA can take that thing and be like, okay, now I'm going to finish my written reevaluation and be able to do the whole, license modification. So that license modification is the thing that we're waiting for. It's going to be the same license, but this time when it says the authorization for flight, that fourth pesky little thing that they had where it says for the first flight only, that's what we want to see disappear from the launch license. Once they have that written reevaluation, then they can remove that or replace it with something else. Maybe it's like for the second flight only or something. We don't really know, right? We'll figure it out in the next few days, hopefully soon as possible. But that is sort of how it's the train of things that we're waiting to see. And so it's not just the Fish and Wildlife Service, but once they finish, then the FAA needs to do a little bit more things. For the first flight, it was about 6 days between one and the other. So that's why I said the other day that it will surprise me if the Fish and Wildlife Service is not done yet, because we are, by SpaceX's own target, we are pretty much 4 or 5 days away from that. And so, if they haven't finished, either the FAA will gonna be, quick and fast and everything, or otherwise, we may not see a launch this week. So, come on, fish people.
So I guess that brings to the biggest question of all then. You can see in the top left of the screen there, that countdown clock to the no earlier than, which is what NET stands for there. So I guess the big question then is, when launch? Trevor, what do you think?
Oh, fight mode.
Yeah, I think I don't see it being this week, and I think a weekend launch is unlikely, and part of me just really hopes it's not this weekend because I have things that I would have to miss it for. So my personal guess is that it's probably more like Monday, if not later next week. However, SpaceX said net 17th. We haven't heard anything, so let's cross our fingers and hope for Friday.
Alex, what are you predicting?
Yeah, I will say something like Trevor, where the more days that we don't see any sort of update from the Fish and Wildlife Service, my hope is that once they're like, if they were done already, right? I will say that maybe they will give us some update of, hey, we're done with our thing, and it's now all on the FAA side of things, right? But again, that FAA side of things is just like the last few days. It might not take a long while. So the more that we pass and we don't have any sort of word from the Fish and Wildlife Service, I'm like, maybe it's not this week, and it could be like there's the possibility that it could be in the weekend. But there's so many things that have so many possibilities, and yet they can be unlikely, right? So that's why I think it is probably unlikely that we see a weekend launch, and perhaps the next attempt might be on Monday the 20th. But again, just like Trevor said, hopefully we see that launch on Friday, because that's what we want. Sooner the better.
The one thing that I'll add to that real quick is just I don't think we should look too much into some of these statements that like the Fish and Wildlife is saying, because it's very standard for them to say there are no updates until they're completely finished, and then they'll just drop the report and then they'll be finished. So it's very possible that they are very close and just giving this boilerplate, we have no updates. But
what is for sure a thing, because there were a lot of rumors on the internet and social media and everything about, oh no, they have the launch license, but they're keeping it under wraps. So first of all, the only excuse, or sort of the only reason that I've seen towards that is that they want to avoid lawsuits. But guess what? They already have a lawsuit in process right now. So I will argue that they already have the lawsuit. They don't lose anything by saying, "Hey, we have the launch license," right? So I don't think they're keeping anything under wraps in that sense that they already have a launch license and they're not trying to say anything. Because I will argue it's the opposite. If they had it, they will want to say it. Hey, we have the launch license, right? And the FAA will be like, hey, it's not our job anymore, right? It's already approved and we don't need to do anything more. So, hand it over to SpaceX, complain about them and everything. So yeah, it's definitely, I don't think that's the case. And, everyone that you see there, no, they have the launch license, but they're keeping it under wraps. No, like just, SpaceX themselves said it the other day. They're still awaiting regulatory approval. So just, trust that word, because that's what's the official word. So just going to say that.
Yeah, and a reminder, Adria did go fishing for answers about it. And we have not heard a response yet of any word of when we might get an update on that. So we're trying, we're checking. It's just we're all in the same boat of waiting. I do want to acknowledge a lot of support that has been coming in, which beyond appreciative. Carson Phillips, 28 months, Capcom member milestone, saying, forgot I could post these here, LOL, Godspeed Starship. Yes, we want only the best for this upcoming flight. CAO, thank you for becoming a Red Team member. John Mond, 16-month Red Team membership, saying, launch is definitely a maybe for this Friday. That's a good way to put it. Should be a blast. Hopefully a blast off. Mike Smith, 39 months as a launch director, saying, enjoy doing my part to help NSF. We are beyond grateful for you doing your part in that case and helping to support us, so thank you. Along those lines, we also have Jerwath, 39 months as well as a flight engineer, saying, seems like just yesterday we were all counting cars and watching for the grass vent, and now we're talking possible launch cadence. Bonkies. I think that's the perfect word for this. Speaking of the 39-month train here, TJ, 39 months Red Team member, saying, thanks for bringing back Countdown to Launch. Well, we have a countdown to a potential launch, so we're more than happy to bring it back. Let's see here. Mateo, 20-month PadRat member milestone, waiting for a complete launch since 20 months ago. Well, hopefully we'll get that complete launch all the way to Hawaii. I like to call it from Hop to Hawaii, coming up maybe no earlier than Friday. Arizona Space Geek, 3-month Red Team membership. Thanks for the awesome Starbase coverage. Been watching since the SN4 RUD. Going way back here now. Out of This World, 9-month Red Team membership. Just want to say a massive thank you for all your hard work. The intro music today gave me goosebumps, knowing very soon we will see this candle light. Yes, hopefully soon we can add the IFT2 footage to that intro. James Atkinson, 26-month Launch Director membership milestone year. Saying if the booster makes it back to hover over the water, what's the chance of the FTS being fired at that point so they can prove to the FAA that it does work now as intended? I don't think they would at that point. And again, they have the whole process of if it gets into the water, especially out by Hawaii, here are the plans to dispose of it, and backup plans and backups to the backups, even involving firearms. So they have the plans out there. Carlo, 5-month Capcom membership. Love the coverage by you guys. Looking forward to Flight 2. Thank you very much. Just another VR user, 2-month Red Team membership milestone. Thank you. Let's hope nothing goes wrong on IFT 2 and 3. That is the main goal here. Catch my breath. Derek Moore, thank you for the $5 super chat as well. How many engines will they likely light on Starship during stage SEP to limit force? I think the plan is the 3 main ones, right? Haven't heard otherwise of any major changes to that. Anthony H. Thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Jarmo, 15-month PadRat membership. Excited for NET, as are we. Hopefully that NET becomes an actual launch, exact launch date and time very soon. Joe Tanner, thank you for becoming a Red Team member. Debbie Bruce saying we need a Jake emoji. I'm all on board with that. Paul Scott, thank you for upgrading to Capcom membership. Liz McQuaid, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Jim Cavett, the super chat, saying love the tag team lineup today. I mean, it helps having an awesome lineup, so I will thank you guys there momentarily, but appreciate the support. Marvin, saying zoom in, there's a guy on top of the booster. At last check, I'm not on any booster. No, we'll see. And again, I'm sure Starbase Live will be keeping an eye on that as well. Infinity Tech, 5 months net today with the 5-month Red Team membership. Xbar, 11-month Red Team membership. Would Starship say, "'Tis the season for launch this week"? Well, we'll see.
Amazing reference.
Yeah, that's a Taylor reference, isn't it?
Yeah, "'Tis the damn season" is a Taylor song.
I'm gonna pretend I didn't read that then. Blackhawk New Zealand, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Justin Dubrek, 6-month Red Team membership. Hearts right back at ya. Natser, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. And Starbase Watcher with the 5-month Red Team membership saying, do you think they'll make it all the way to Hawaii? And if they do you think what is next for Starship? We'll end on that. What do you guys think here? Will they make it to Hawaii? Alex, what do you think?
I think there's low chances of that, but I think the ship at least will survive stage separation. I hope so, at least.
And Trevor?
I don't want to pull a Peter Beck, but if I was Peter Beck 3 years ago, I would eat a hat if it reached Hawaii. And for what's next for Starship, it's just, starting to get the cadence up and start working on deploying operational payloads into orbit.
Ironic considering Peter Beck's disdain for marine assets, as we're talking about splashing it down here. And then finally, Bideford with a $50 super chat. Always appreciated, Bideford, saying thank you, Trevor, Alex, and Sawyer. Puns needed. Hey, that's what we're here for. And the good news is we've got more of these countdown to launches coming up as we, continue to count down to launch. So speaking of those thank yous, I do want to thank everyone that was here with me on stream. A huge thank you to Alex for all of your help here today.
It's always a pleasure.
And then, very short, yeah. And then a thank you as well to Trevor.
Yeah, of course. Thanks everyone for tuning in today.
And I have to give a huge, huge thank you to everybody out in the field right now, including the field, aka Jack. So there's whole teams that are out there right now trying to keep these cameras up and running, all while having to go through flooded streets and water up to their ankles. It's an absolute mess out there weather-wise, but they're doing everything they can to keep all of that gear up and running and transmitting so that we can bring you all of these views as we continue to count down to launch. So a major, major thank you to our Starbase team, and we appreciate everything that they do down there. Thank you again to all of our members. As you saw, we had a lot of them, including our launch director and flight engineers who have been fantastic with their levels of support, especially as you saw today. You get your name at the end of NSF Live and at the end of Countdown to Launch now too, as an added free bonus for you there. So just figured we'd mention that before I also thank Kevin Michael Reed, who's been the one behind the scenes making all these graphics pop up, getting us these live views, and making us look semi-presentable. So thank you, Kevin, as well. A reminder, I know this is, it's sad to be the end of Countdown to Launch, but guess what? You missed it, or you're sad, don't worry, there's another one coming up tomorrow. We'll be back 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, basically every day until we get a flight or until we get word of a longer delay, which we hopefully don't get. So hopefully we'll see you at the next one tomorrow. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Later, nerds, and hopefully we'll see you in Starbase Alive in the meantime.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RS-68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside speed off. Bring in SPD off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Look at that. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed. We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?